Bam.
This is Ben Buehler-Garcia. You're watching the Break It Down show.
This is neat, man. We've been talking about this, and this is all on me about doing this. And I be damned if I. Sometimes, like the closest shows to you, you just forget that they're there to do. So you never ask. And I'm looking all over the world for people, and then every time you see me, I'd be like, "Oh shit!" You're like, "You're gonna have me." And you're like, "God damn it!" But I'm so glad we got this done finally. It's such a thrill to have you on. You have your own show. Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. This is all fantastic for me.
It's a real privilege, Pete. Thanks for having me. And I tell you, it was it was 5 years ago to the day when my numbers exploded. I mean, I had to get a bigger PO box because of the fan mail,
Yeah.
hire a new receptionist because that's the day we had Pete Turner on American Boy Radio.
Is it 5 years ago to the day? Is that right?
Yeah, January 5th, 2020.
Wow, man. Wow. You didn't know
And we're
you were
still we're
getting.
still with it. It's amazing, huh?
I know, right? Yeah, let's get into that in a second. But you didn't know you were even going to do this sort of stuff. I don't know how many years ago, and you had no clue, and all of a sudden now you do this for a living.
So I never being a radio host was not on my punch list. And the founder of American Warrior Radio is a fellow by the name of Dave Sitton. And Dave came to the University of Arizona on a baseball scholarship with the plan to join the Marines when he graduated. Well, he got hurt pretty bad playing ball and was no longer qualified to serve in the military. So he's the one that originally came up with the concept of creating a show to bridge the gap of understanding between those who wore the uniform and the rest of the civilian population. And
Right.
he knew I'd been involved in supporting lots of military groups here in town. And um, so he had asked me to, send him guest ideas. And then he said, "Hey, come sit in with me on a show. We'll have some fun." And then he ran for Congress. And because the FCC rules, he couldn't be on the air. So he asked me to guest host for him during that time. Well, uh, several months after that, he didn't win. Several months after that, as the story goes, I wasn't there, but Dave came into the studio to do the show, and the producer said, "Hey, you look a little off," and he says, "I don't feel quite right, but I've got a doctor's appointment tomorrow." Well, tomorrow never came.
Right.
58 years old, really tragic. So when that happened, I decided to jump in with both feet to revive the show. I got his family's permission, obviously, and I approached the station that he was on at the time, and they didn't care as long as my check cleared. But I had absolutely no idea about anything doing radio, so it's been a on the job learning experience. Going on.
Yeah.
Our first broadcast was actually on Pearl Harbor Day, 2013.
Wow. Has it changed your life?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so because I've always, Pete, I never served in the military. I was a criminal justice major, but I never carried a badge. So I've always felt my entire adult life it's my duty to support
Mhm.
folks like you who do and who have. But I really had, just the depth of the stories that we've had on American Warrior Radio. We're over 600 shows now. And when you're a guy like me who thinks that you know about the military and the sacrifice, and then you hear some of these stories coming from the guests, it really even for someone like me, it's very enlightening.
The one of the things I've gathered from all the shows, I don't stick within the military bubble, but it doesn't matter. Even if it is the military bubble, it's so everybody's so different. Like we tend to put veterans in one big pile, these disaffected, angry, dangerous people, or whatever it's going to be. Maybe they're heroes and all that, whatever it is. But maybe there's 25 things we use to describe people from the military. You and I both know every one of us is like everybody is completely different. So our mutual friend Scott Husing and I are different people. We get along famously, right? And then the next person's totally different, and the next person's totally. And all of a sudden, you realize like this is just a slice of America. That's sort of what I've learned with my show, and that's not even military. That's just in general. People everywhere are people.
So we're unlike you, yeah, we're very niched. I mean, basically, it's military or first responders.
Right.
Basically, those who protect us at home and abroad is our tagline. And
Mhm.
particularly when it comes to the first responder side of the equation, the police, particularly law enforcement, the mission is to humanize those folks
Mhm.
for the listeners out there because they just don't, they see the uniform and they think they're a bad, there's going to be a problem right away. They don't think about,
Right.
this is someone who's a husband, a wife, a brother, sister, son, daughter. And I had a guest on during National Police Week, and he shared some data with me that just completely shocked me. He says, your average person, your average civilian will have 4, maybe 5 truly traumatic experiences in their entire life. Your average cop will have 700 over a
Yeah.
20-year career. And you just think
Yeah.
about that. My day job, I'm a lobbyist, and a mayor and council hearing or testimony at the legislature, it can get a little sporty, but my wife
Sure.
doesn't worry about me coming home alive, when I
Right.
leave the house in the morning. So, that's part of the mission set. So really, and we've had people that weren't military but are military supporters. So there's got to be some
Sure.
kind of hook. That's the Gary Sinises of the world, the Bo Derek, the Lee
Right.
Greenwoods, folks like that, because they
Yeah.
also have a very powerful message to share with other civilians out there.
Yeah. David Neese and I were just talking. You must know David. He produced the movie. It's coming out this week. Like, no, wait. In 2 weeks, it's coming out. It's called The Gift. And it's a
Hmm.
story of Jason Dunham and he dove on a grenade. Whoever didn't know, Jason Dunham dove on a grenade, was the recipient of the Medal of Honor, and David and that unit got together and started talking about the gift that Jason had given them. It's called The Gift. There's actually a ship, the USS Jason Dunham, and it's in, where's the book? Oh, it's not in here right now, but it's in the latest Jack Ryan book from Anderson Wilson.
Oh,
The USS
cool.
Dunham. Yeah, and so all these things go together, man. It's fun.
And that's something else that I try and learn. So I do learn something from every show. And
Right.
you talk about Andrews and Wilson. What a
Oh,
pair of those guys are. And one thing I learned from them is, there's so many veterans that are now in that battle space of writing, whether it's fiction or
yeah.
nonfiction, and the extent to which they are so supportive of each other. You'd think
Mm,
they'd be competitors and know, stay in your lane, but they're so supportive of each other. And I
yeah.
maybe need to have those guys back on the show. They were a hoot.
Oh man, they're so much fun. And for those you guys, if you haven't seen them on this show, they are a team of writers, both of them veterans, one a submariner, one like a fighter pilot,
Oh,
surgeons,
pause,
SF guy or something like this.
pause. I'm going to forgive you because you were Army, right?
Army, yeah, 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 yeah.
Submariner.
Yeah,
You don't you
submariner,
you
submariner.
don't say
Yeah. See, look, you know
submariner
something I
because
don't know.
that well, but
Yeah.
see that insinuates that they're less than a regular mariner. So they don't like that.
Oh,
So submariner.
yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
That's
Whatever.
your
Yeah,
takeaway
yeah.
today. Yeah,
Well,
whatever. I'm Army. I don't care.
we call people subordinates too. So it's like
Ah,
you are subordinate. Yes, yeah, the guys who work in submarines and do that. Anyhow, they're super. They're great. They have their own series of things, and then they write for other series. Tom Clancy,
mhm,
the
mhm,
Jack
mhm.
Ryans. Oh my gosh, it's incredible. But these back to these first responders, these people that have all these traumatic incidences. My buddy Brian ran a 911 center. He just recently retired,
Mm.
and right before he retired, there was this catastrophic accident, and the phone automatically dials 911. So when his newest 911 operator takes this call, and it's a family burning to death,
Oh my gosh.
and it was so
Yeah.
traumatic. And I'm
Yeah.
like, the thing that we don't get is like, this is a day at work for these guys, right? And
Yeah.
so it's so traumatic that they immediately deploy their traumatic incident, like internal help guy to help the cops and all of the first responders that are responding. Brian is like, this is so bad. I'm going to go out. So he leaves his desk and goes out to respond to this thing. It's a little kid. It's a mom. They can hear them screaming. The dad survives somehow. And they're, uh, internal mental health person who responds to these things is sitting on a sidewalk, and he can't deal with it. Like, he can't handle it, and his job is to guide everybody else through because they take these hits. And Brian, you know, look, I've known Brian 40 plus years, so I've known him a long time, and he's a wonderful dude. And it never even occurred to me that he would take those kind of hits. Looking at his friends having this big damage, and then he's got to walk away. I don't know, 2 weeks later, he retires.
Start over.
And yeah, well, yeah, and then stay alive too, right? Like, how many cops
Yeah.
die a month after they retire or a year after they retire because they don't withstand that transition. It's heavy. It's heavy on them.
It's I tried. You mind me think of? I just had a fellow who was on who was a drone pilot. And like I said, I try and learn everything from every show, and he explains that people might think that that's less traumatic because he had flown both as a fighter pilot in combat, and now he's flying
Mhm.
drones. And he says,
Mm.
but it's not because he had flown to Vietnam, and he says, I'm dropping ordnance from 20,000 feet. And, maybe I'll
Right.
see explosions or something, but I don't actually see what happens. But when you're flying a drone, you might actually be tracking that person for weeks. You kind
Yeah.
of get to know them.
Oh
And
yeah.
then you're actually seeing, the effect of when you push that button and launch that weapon. So he says it's actually more. It's more traumatic flying drones than it was flying air combat
It's crazy.
as a pilot, a front seater. So
Yeah.
yeah, and again,
Yeah.
those are the kind of messages that we want to communicate to people. We try and have, and sometimes it's really serious. I had a fellow on, Pete, 6 months ago, who flew for Air America, and
Mm.
he was the last plane out of Cambodia. And he's
Wow.
literally sitting there on the runway outside Phnom Penh, and he's got his team. He's gathered together, and the fellow who was responsible running the airport, he's sitting out there and he's saluting this guy, and he's like, "Come, come with me." He says, "I can't. My wife's in the city." And the way
Yeah.
he says, and tears were running down his dusty face, and we both knew that his life was about to be over.
Yeah.
And you hear that from the mouth of the people that have been there. That's what I want other civilians out there to hear. So they pause and think.
Yeah. It's when we all, it's the norm that we take a look at these conflicts and we're like, America bombed the Houthis today. That means people died.
Yeah,
Whether they're combatants or not, people died. And the more there's conflict, the amount of lives that have been either destroyed, ruined, damaged in Ukraine and in Russia, these things are heavy on people. And it doesn't stop being heavy and damaging when the war is over. It continues to go. So we often just look past the fact that, if 1 in 4 men in Ukraine are dead, or 1 in 8, or whatever that number is, right? It's like it's ghastly. And you think about how much impact that has for someone to willingly walk into that fight and say, "I have to fight for my country," and then they pay the ultimate sacrifice. How does that family go on? How do the women who don't have enough men around, how do they avoid being exploited and all these horrible things? All these after effects of war. It's awful. It's awful.
yeah. I just had actually one thing I learned pretty early on is to go to podcasts like yours and steal the guests. It
Yeah.
makes my job easier. And I just had
Yeah. Same.
Matt on. You had part of his initial assignment was he worked the honor guard, and he was at Dover. And he said the
Mhm.
first time they're unloading caskets off the plane, the first two were heavy and the third one was very
Mhm.
light. And he
Yeah.
thought, oh, you know, that kind of stuff. But it's
Yeah.
also, I would say, in the going on 11, 12 years now, I don't do math in public, but in the while I've been doing the show, by far the most downloaded podcast,
Mm.
far and away, is a fellow by the name of Mike Day. And I don't know if you
Oh, sure.
recognize that name. Mike Day was a Navy SEAL, and they're going
Yeah.
after a high value target. And long story short, the way he described it, any place you could touch me except for my head, I've been shot. 27 he
Mhm.
absorbed.
Yeah.
Now 16 went into his armor, but 11 other wounds. He dispatched the bad guys, cleared the house, walked himself to the evacuation helicopter.
Yeah.
He
It's
wrote
crazy.
a book. He wrote a book couple of years after I interviewed him, and so I got a hold of him and said, "Hey, you want to come back on the show and talk about your book?" And he says, Ben, I'm not in that headspace right now. I just, thank you, but no," he declined. Well, then, Mike took his own life,
Yeah.
and you think about that. Of course, why? But and so it's yeah, I'd say. I mean, you also have some fun. I had a sorry, I'm used to waiting for the commercial break, but I guess you guys don't have to do that.
We just roll right
Um,
on through, buddy.
All right. I had a World War II B-17 pilot on the show,
Oh, cool.
and he was a local guy. I'd heard his story. I'd heard his presentation before, so I knew the tempo of his story.
Mhm.
Well, we go to the third commercial break. It was during COVID, so he's doing he was calling in, and we go to the third commercial break, and we come back. My producer hits the mic button. This guy's still talking, and he's 5 minutes down the road in his story. And I think he missed the cue. He was hard of hearing, so he just kept talking through the entire commercial break. Well, what do you do? I mean, just you roll
Yeah.
with it and go forward. So
Yeah.
I say someone asked me recently, who was your favorite guest? And, that's kind of like asking a parent who their favorite child is. It's not
Oh,
not really
yeah.
fair, but
Right.
I can tell you one of the most surprising guests was Bo Derek. And you think, Bo Derek, what does she have to do? What's her hook there? Well,
Right.
her father was a Green Beret in Vietnam. She's an honorary Green Beret. She does all kinds of things to support, injured veterans. And at the time that I spoke with her, she had a product line for dogs, shampoos
Mm,
and care products, and she was shipping all this stuff free of charge to overseas to
crazy.
deployed dog handlers. And smart, I mean, just sharp as a tack, a great businesswoman. And I
Yeah.
confess that surprised me a little bit. But what a great guest to have on.
There are so many incredible people you encounter, and it takes words out of my mouth when I start to think like the little cash register in my head's like ting person, ting. And so I'm trying to tell you about a person, but they keep flowing through because there's thousands of people, right? We've just met so
Hmm.
many people, and they often change your life. Like in less than 2 weeks, I'm going to have Stephanie Powers on the show. Bo Derek, Stephanie Powers. These are comparable people, and I can't wait to meet her and talk to her and just see what she's up to. And I'm sure she's going to blow me away with how kind and how gracious she is. And even if she's putting on a show because she's an actress, she's still great at talking to people. And it's going to be an absolute pleasure. So having Bo Derek on the show, I'm super excited. I'm actually chasing Morgan Fairchild, going to have her on the show, because
Wow, there's
I
a
want
blast from the
these.
past.
Right. But I want these ladies to still be relevant in the world. And look, they're relevant in their world and what they do, but we can open that window a little bit. And I know from talking to them, like they appreciate it. They appreciate the fact that someone's asking, like,
Mhm.
hey, yeah, come on the show. And it's just a matter of when is it business wise smart for them to do it. Like, hey, I don't have a product I'm pushing right now, but give me 6 months, and then bam, all of a sudden you're talking to Bo Derek.
Okay, pause. Shameless plug.
Yeah. Yeah. There it is right there.
Mm.
And so
So,
good.
sometimes there's not a fit. There was I can't remember her name, but it was Megan Lee. The movie was Megan Levy about the female Marine dog handler,
Hmm.
and the studio reached out to us just as the film was about to come out, and um, okay, it's great publicity for me, big name star. But I looked into her background. She's never done anything to support the military. Doesn't have any military veteran causes, first responders, anything like that.
Hmm.
So, I basically told the studio no. I mean, no offense, but it doesn't
Right.
fit. It doesn't work for American Warrior Radio. And then the other thing that really and maybe you see this can be kind of frustrating is when they are out there on that promo tour, they've written a book or something like that. I've got two hard and fast rules for our show. One, we don't talk politics because we
Yeah.
have so many active duty people on. We don't want to put them in that position. And there's plenty of other
Right.
opportunity for that out there. But then if somebody's written a book, I have to read it. I have to read the whole thing before they come
Hmm.
on the show. And I'm their 26th interview of the week. And so they're stuck
Right.
in those ruts of their talking points and that little two-sheeter that their publisher sent me. And I don't want to talk about any
Hmm.
of that. I want to talk about your book.
Exactly.
And
Right.
very often I find they're grateful for that, Pete. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, how refreshing. And I
Yeah.
think the other advantage, like you to some extent, is we're an hour show, but we dedicate the entire show to just one guest so that we can do those kind of deep dives that let people really get to
Yeah.
know them.
Yeah, I mean, you've written 60,000 to 100,000 words or whatever, like whatever number's bigger than that, that's fine. How do we cover that in 7 minutes? I'm like, and do your brilliance justice. Even if you've ghost written the book, it's still your work and someone else is typing the words in. I get all that. There's no problem with that. But yeah, I can't imagine trying to cram that down into one time we got offered Danny Trejo and I said, okay, great. Let me know what hour he wants and then I'll make room for it no matter what. Glad to have him. Like, no, no, no. Only doing 8 minutes. And I'm like, no, no, I'm not talking to Danny Trejo for only 8 minutes.
You
I'm not
turned
doing it. And
down
so
Danny Trejo.
I did. I did. I
Do
couldn't.
you have security?
No, but I have had his tacos and they are lovely.
Oh, okay.
But when you do it, you have to have your standard for what you'll work within because you got to know your show. Will I compress it down to 30 minutes? Sure, right? And get them on there. But really it has to be someone like Danny Trejo that I'm excited to talk to. Otherwise, I'm glad to say no and talk to somebody else because you don't have to just talk to famous people to have incredible experiences because there's all kinds of people that are famous within their own life And you're like, well, why wouldn't I talk to you? You know, whatever experience you've been through, maybe it's your one thing. Like, so here's a guy who's only famous because one terrible thing happened in his life. His name's Harold Bray. He is the last surviving sailor from the USS Indianapolis being sunk back in World War II. He's the last dude. Nobody else left alive. It is the only reason why he's famous. He's from my hometown, and so I get to talk to him whenever I want, but I don't bug him because you know what he talks about? When he talks to me, he talks about the worst day of his life. So I just don't want to put him through that anymore. But you can talk to amazing people that are famous for one specific thing, and you may never have heard of them in your entire life. So I don't have to have Danny. I'd love to have Danny Trejo. Don't have to have him because there's a million Harold Brays out there that have incredible stories.
Well, that's why we do what we do at American Warrior Radio, and particularly with, I don't know how much in advance you have to book your guests, but if it's a World War II or a Korean era person, they go right to the front of the line.
Right to the front. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I don't see a fit for Danny Trejo on our show, but if he was in the lineup and a World War II guy pops up, sorry, Danny, you're going to have to wait. And I had a woman on who was a nurse at the Battle of the Bulge.
Wow.
People names you've never heard of. Yeah, it's cool to have the Medal of Honor winners on and whatnot, but you're right. Sometimes some of the best stories are stories that came to me from a family member or someone like that, and nobody's ever heard of this person. Their internet presence is zero. But
Right.
what great, powerful stories. And the thing about, so every year, a couple of years ago, Pete, I started doing this. I don't know why. It's kind of morbid, but I would start going through my guest list and see who was still with us. And of
Yeah.
course, particularly of that generation or folks like
Oh,
Mike
yeah.
Day, when you lose them, it's sad, but I'm also grateful that we're able to record their story.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
we've got it forever, and it's not lost because so often I can't imagine all the stories that never went or were never told, and that's a loss for
Yeah.
all of us.
Yeah. It is not infrequent that someone from a family will be like, oh my gosh, I just found your show with my father, grandmother, whoever it's going to be. And it's wonderful to hear their voice again. I never knew about this part of their life, or I've heard this story, but never these parts of the story. And so that happens. Look, and this must happen for you. It happens all the time where I get an email like, oh my God, I just found this thing. Or one guy, he found the show twice. He's like, I had found it and I had totally forgotten about it. And then I was searching around and your show came up. And so I listened to it again and I'm like, oh my God, it's like I'd never heard this before. Because it had been so long between, his dad's passing and his memory, like listening to that show the first time. But now with this new brain, years and years after his dad's passing, he was like, it was amazing to hear again my dad's voice. I was like, it's a crazy thing. We are creating an archive of these lives. And it's an incredible, it's an honor and what a wonderful, enriching experience it is for me. And I think for the audience too.
So like I said, I try and learn something from every show, and you're no different. Seeing so you're an expert. I mean, this is the Break It Down show, man. I mean,
That's right.
I've reached the pinnacle. Everything's going to be downhill from here. But what is the how do you do you get the folks that are just pestiferous and just won't go away? It's like, look, I understand you're trying to represent your client, but you're actually pissing me off here. They're not going to come on the show. Go away. In fact, here's the name of some other shows. Call them. But do you get that a lot, or?
I get the person who, and I've gotten better at this, who is desperate to be on a show, any show, and I love to say yes to these folks. I got room for them, and I purposely try to help people get a start, help people get a little bit better, whatever it is. I'm always trying to help because I had a lot of help starting out, so I'm always trying to do that. But if the person can't be ready, if they can't be coached, if they can't allow me to guide them, how am I going to host them? I can't bring out the best of them. And I'll tell a lot of, especially new authors, because they're so excited about writing their book. And I want to be excited for them, but ultimately I don't care about their book because there's so many books. I just can't care about all of them. So it's their passion. And I'll say, look, this is your passion thing. And if you want to be on my show, here's the best way I can help you is, let's do this. You kick in some money for an ad. I'll put the time in to build the ad and we'll run that and more people will hear it. And I'm talking like $100. I'm not trying to make any money on this. This is just going to go right back. It goes right back into the show immediately. Right. And then they get bent out of shape. And I'm like, listen, you should be advertising on radio. You should be advertising in a lot of places because you have to be salesperson of the year for your book. So you've written one book. a lot of people have done that. You have to be able to, and so these are the people that I try to coach and get them to go in the right direction. And they just seem to not want to hear that. They just want to come on the show. And like, you just want me to do something for you. And look, there's nothing in it for me. I'm sorry. I can help you. Here's how I can help you. Here's what it looks like. Let me know if that works for you. And then that usually gets rid of them, but that's it.
When I first started, I was only maybe a year or two into doing the show, and at my flagship station at the time, the weekday guy would have me come on Fridays during drive time and promote the guest that was coming up that weekend on American Warrior Radio. And one Friday, I was just dragging butt, Pete. I just so did not want to be there. And this guy's a real pro. He's now got a station. He's on Morning Drive in Minneapolis, and we go to commercial break, and he reaches out and he touches me on the leg. Says, "Hey Ben, we get to do radio. How cool is that?"
Wow.
And I thought, you know what? It really, it's a privilege. It is a privilege to
is.
get in between people's ears. In my case, once a week. And the one thing that I'm looking to improve in 2025 is I don't get a lot of feedback. People can find us AmericanWarriorRadio.com. It's easy. You can send us a note there, but it's hard to not get immediate feedback. And there you go. Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm face for radio.
Everybody listening, there's a link on the screen. Some people only have audio. You're pointing at stuff.
I remember I got a call from one of my stations, and they said, "Well, we got, this lady gave us a card." I was like, "Well, a business card?" He's like, "No, like an old-fashioned doily thank you note." And she had written the station, and she's retired on a fixed income, but every month she sends a check to a charity. And she had heard one of the shows we'd done on charity, and so she wanted to get the contact information so that she could send them a check. And that's, if I ever drag anymore, and then you hear those stories, like, yeah, okay, we're doing the right thing here. And it really, I can't emphasize how much it's just such a privilege to do what I'm doing, what you're doing.
Have you had Jason Schechter? He's an Arizona guy. Has he been on your show? Phoenix cop?
No,
Basically burned alive in his car.
yes, I know who you're talking about, but no, he's not been on the show yet. So,
man, his story is
and
crazy.
That's the other challenge I learned right away is, every Navy SEAL has started a coffee company, written a book, got a T-shirt, whatever. And my flagship station in Tucson, of course, it's a big Air Force town. It's one of the largest Air Force bases in the Air Force. But it was hard. So, okay, I don't want to become the all Air Force show. I don't want to become the all Navy SEAL show. So you want to kind of, mixing it up, not just the branches, but then also having a good trade-off between, law enforcement and military. And we also don't ignore the, 3-letter agencies, the CIA guys, the FBI. In fact, I've been doing the show about 5 years, and I never had to use the dump button. And if folks aren't familiar with that, that's the famous button that you hear beep when they say something, because I can't talk like you talk. We're on, there's FCC fines and stuff. But the first time I ever had to do that was actually a woman. She was a female ATF agent. She was describing a shootout, and she used very descriptive language. So we had to beep her. But no, I've had obscure, postal inspectors. People think, what? But fascinating show. And then two of the guys that really stick in my head, I don't know if you've had them on, but they're Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, who the Netflix series Narcos, that was based on their real story. So I actually had the two actual DEA guys on American Warrior Radio, and they were funny. Oh, serious subject, but they were just a hoot. They were very good. I'd highly recommend them.
Yeah, and you're right. There are so many different stories. Maybe you've had him on, and I'm trying to think of his name. I've got his book up here somewhere. He talks about the hidden. Yeah, it's right. My buddy Scott Using, like one of my best friends in the whole wide world. Yes, but in this case, I'm talking about a dude who was a fish and game warden for California, and he writes about the hidden wars. And so they're doing narco combat in California. And because of the nature of being a fish and game person, so he's a badged and credentialed police officer or some kind of officer. He also is badged and credentialed as a federal officer, because a lot of the things that they do are also federal things. And so if you go, I'm in Nevada, he's like, I have 2 badges. But his life, 11 of these dudes for all of California. If you can imagine how much
Oh
wild
my.
space we have here, it's crazy. 11 would be a lot for Arizona because you guys have Coco Nino County, which is bigger than states. It's a huge county, and it's almost all wild space, right? And so these guys are out there trying to battle and these are fishing game dudes. So it doesn't make any sense, right? But you're like, yeah, but you're harming our fishing game by putting your drugs in these illegal areas that are protected, and you're spraying them with things. And so I had no idea about what he had to do his job and how absolutely so they train with tier 1 dudes. So this is for people listening, like pararescue, SEAL snipers. He cross trains with these guys, and they go to schools with each other. And when they go out to do an op, they'll call up and they'll task the Air Force pararescue dudes as a resource for their operation in case something happens. Right? I didn't know there were tier 1 fishing game people. Did you know this?
No, I'm actually, no, not tier 1, but I
Yeah.
did early. Part of the way I paid for college was fighting forest fires, and
Mm-hmm.
my brother was a ranger. I was a firefighter, but uh, he he was always reticent to actually write someone a ticket because that's a federal violation. You don't go down to the local judge; you have to go to district court to clear this up.
Right.
So he was always very prudent about doing that. And the only time that summer he actually wrote someone as a ticket, it was when we had a fire closure, so no open campfires.
Mm-hmm.
And this one guy actually broke up the no campfire signs and built a fire out of them. And he said, "No, you win. You're getting a ticket." Someone else who's really good. I don't want where your listeners are going to get turned off by this. We're geeking out here, host
Yeah.
talk. But Wade Ishimoto, who was one of the
Ah,
first, he was like one of the first 5 guys recruited to Delta, and he was
yeah.
involved in planning of Operation Eagle Claw. Was actually on that mission, almost got left behind. But he
Wow.
gives you some of the insights as to what with a new unit like that, what they could do, what they couldn't do. There's a lot of gray areas. Posse comitatus. They
Mhm.
could go out on some of these incidents, but they couldn't really give advice. I'm just here to observe. Well, I'm thinking as a civilian, I'm thinking, well, what good are you if you're only here to? Well, we got to be very careful about that. So great
Yeah.
guest too.
Yeah.
He's a cool guy.
The guy I was talking about, his name's John Norris, N-O-R-E-S, John
Mm.
Norris. Everybody check out his book. It's called Hidden War. And boy, what a great guest. Yeah. And the kind of guy that he's like, all of these guys. And I had forgotten about the guy you said, but I remember he's one of the first Delta guys. The Delta is such an interesting unit. Like, every now and then when I'd be on the camps or whatever, I'd end up on the little compounds because I was good at what I did. And I'm like, hey, I want to come over and see how I can help you guys. And a lot of times it's the teams that do those things. And I don't even want to talk about names or anything because that's not why I was there. But oftentimes they're like, hey, we have a gray area that's pretty black, but you might be able to help us. And so there were times, not a whole lot, where they would carve out a space for me. And if I could help them in that space, they were glad to oblige to give me access to things and take, whatever. Very specific collection requirements, so hard to like hit that mark easily. But just to have someone efforting that for them was helpful at times. And so their world is very, very, very interesting. And the things that they can and can't do,
Yeah.
it's, look, they can do a lot of things, but when they can't do something, it's a pretty clear line. And so, yeah, careers in
You make,
combat are very interesting places.
you make me chuckle. One of the worst guests well, initially, I should say worst guest, but he was a pararescue, a PJ, a young guy. I don't know, maybe 23, 24, chest full of ribbons. And
Right.
so we're doing the show, and his answers were yes, sir, no, sir,
Oh my gosh.
can't talk about it.
Right.
And on
Yeah.
the commercial break, I'm like, dude, we got an hour to fill here. You need to,
Yeah.
stretch it
Yeah.
out a little bit more. But
Yeah.
you can't.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So I don't know. I just like I said,
Yeah.
it started off as a weekend labor of love for me, and
Yeah.
it's been a quite an experience since then, Pete. And the real breaking point, or not breaking point, but the kind of the flashpoint for me, I've been doing the show about 2.5 years, and we started to get inquiries from the publicists and the movie studios and the
Same.
national level
Yeah.
folks, and that's when it just struck me as well. Ben, if you're really committed to this mission of telling these stories, you need to commit to getting it to as many ears as possible.
Yeah.
So, I added one station in Phoenix, and I added, Colorado Springs and Sacramento, and then, last year we finally were signed to national syndication. So
Yeah.
it's been a cool ride. And then I mean, I think I'm most excited about this year is we were selected to broadcast on American Forces Network. So starting sometime this month, these stories will be going out to deployed military in
Yeah.
168 countries, something like that. Some
I don't know
ships
how
at
it is
sea.
now,
So
but when I was in Germany, my alarm clock, you got to get up and everything, and it would play AFN because that's what I wanted to hear because that was the local news. Everybody listened to it, so you needed to know what everybody knew because you didn't want to be out of the know. In my line, it's bad to be a counterintelligence agent surrounded by a bunch of counterintelligence agents saying, "I didn't know that. I didn't know that." What's a bad thing to do? Yeah, that'll get you
right.
pushed down. And so, yeah, AFN was central to all of our days. And when you sat on a board or you held a board for soldiers to do whatever, get promoted or be uh, recognized, the AFN source, you had to have a command of what was going on at AFN, and not just like for today, like 5 weeks back, 6 months back, like this happened. They talked about an AFN, talk about that story, and then you're like, oh my gosh, thankfully I listened to whoever it is, and that's a big deal, man, to get on AFN. So that's worldwide, right?
Yeah. Like I said, that I mean, from what they told me, they shared it's approximately 168 countries and 200 ships at sea.
That's almost all of them. That's almost all. I mean, give or take, depending on how you count it. There's 200 countries.
Probably, probably not the submarines.
Yeah,
I don't
those
think they I don't
submarine.
think they can catch a signal. Yeah, those submariners.
Yeah, you don't
Uh,
think they download something when they're up, when they're on the surface? Download
well,
some
I
AFN?
don't know. So one of the volunteer things I do is I'm Vice-Chairman of the USS Tucson, which is our fast attack boat out of Pearl Harbor. So
Sure.
I've got to know those crews pretty well, and they're not they don't come up very often, Pete. I mean, they're in
Right.
places where they're not supposed to be. So I think the one guy, the longest I'd heard, he'd been submerged 3.5 months, and they're down to peanut butter and jelly because that's they
Yeah.
they don't need to refuel. They make all their own oxygen
Right.
and water. The only thing that limits their time underwater is the food.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, not quite the same as being on an aircraft carrier and you got Wi-Fi and
Yeah.
you're good to go.
What do they do? Do they just constantly circulate the air and just turn the carbon monoxide monoxide into oxygen again? Is that what they're always doing? Or do they have to vent? What do they
It's
do
called
for 3.5 months to deal with the gas problem?
it's called chemistry.
Well, yeah, fair
H
enough. Yeah, they
What
got to
is
put it.
water? H2O.
Sure, sure.
So you
But I mean, still,
basically
like you're off gassing things. Things are disappearing. Like food is being turned into energy, which is being turned into waste, right? And
right.
so, yeah, you can process your own water and process your own air. But yeah, I mean, at some point you got to open the lid and let some stuff out.
Well, they like I said, they basically manufacture their own water or their own
Right.
air from water. And of course, they vent the waste overboard. In fact, I was doing
Yeah.
a live broadcast from the USS Tucson. They just happened to be in San Diego, and we were down in the officers' mess, and we're doing this live broadcast. So I'm drinking this good Navy coffee, man. It's chewy. I'm
Mhm.
loving it. Well, pretty soon I got to hit the head. Well, you
Yeah.
go in there, and I don't know if you've ever been on a submarine, but there's
Yeah.
a number of levers and buttons and things you have to do, and you have to do in the right order, or else it's coming at you, not the other way around. So I'm sitting there, I'm stomping my feet. I cannot figure out how to flush this damn toilet. And I finally had to
Mhm.
open the door and ask some sailor to come in and show me how to flush the darn toilet. That was a humbling
Yeah.
experience.
Hilarious.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
God bless. So there's a number of things that there's not enough money in the world to pay me to do, and one's to serve on a submarine. The other is to be a border patrol agent. You talk about my flagship station here in Tucson. You get the desert down south of us towards the Mexico border. That's a lot of just barren country, and these
Yeah.
guys are out there by themselves. I mean, help's not
Mhm.
coming. It's just not.
Yeah. Right.
And to go
Right.
out there and do what they do is, I'm very grateful for that.
It is a thing to be grateful for. And when you do recognize the different worlds that we live in, have you had anybody from the Space Force on your show yet? That's one of
I
the
have
blocks
not.
I'd like to check.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we
I,
got to find someone and pass that person back and forth. But so if a person's a fighter pilot, it's amazing to get to that job. It's like impossible to do. And if you said, "Hey, why don't you and me go on a combat patrol together?" They'd be like, "On the ground? You got to be kidding me!" Right? And so, like the guys in the submarines, that if you're like, "Hey, let's go up in the air," they're like, "No, no, thank you." Like it's very. You kind of find yourself in the spot where you need to be, in terms of the strata of jobs that you can do, and you wouldn't want anything to do with someone else's job because like that seems crazy to do, at
So
the very top level.
one of the jokes I often hear from them is, where people give them a hard time about, well, it's more dangerous than being a fighter pilot, and they'll often say, well, there's more planes in the ocean than there are submarines in the air. So
Yeah.
you tell me which is more dangerous.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's yeah, it's Space Force. I got to tell you, well, I shouldn't say this with the millions of people that are going to be watching this or listening to this, but I had a real issue with their insignia. I mean,
Too Star
somebody just
Trekky.
literally stole that too. It's all
Yeah.
Star Trek. Come on. I mean, what the amount of money we've got in the DoD budget, we can't pay some 18-year-old somewhere to design a unique logo. Or come
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
hard
the
for me
Army
to.
loves lightning bolts and stars and leaves, so, yeah. I don't know. It is a little silly that it looks like the Star Trek thing. It is.
Okay.
But they had to start somewhere. So may as well start with the Space Force and turn into the whatever they call that thing later on.
Well, I
Uh,
guess have they been
yeah.
around long enough to really make a good show?
I don't know. I mean, and it's also the first grandkid service, right? Because like the Marines are kind of a little brother to the Navy. Don't tell them that, they get
Mm.
mad. The Air Force for sure is offspring of the Army,
Well, the
and then
Army, yeah.
Space Force is their offspring, and so it's going to take time. There's no doubt that space is going to be an important competitive area, even if it's just business. And right now today, everybody agrees that space is not for fighting until someone breaks that rule, right? There are lawyers for space, by the way. So if you want to do something in space, you have to hire a lawyer who knows the law for space, and someone represents space in that whole thing. And they're like, "Nah, you
So
can't do that." Yeah,
did you see there's a company out of Texas? I can't remember the name, just Lone Star or something maybe, but they're actually launching in February. They're going to start doing data storage on the moon.
why not? Why not?
And
You know?
yeah, it does make you think about international law. It's like, well, who has rights
Hmm.
to the moon? Who gets to
Yeah,
do that? And
yeah.
it's interesting. There's a treaty that was signed through the UN about this. And interestingly enough, the only countries who have not ratified that treaty are those of us who actually can get to the moon. Us, Russia, China.
Yeah,
You know, if
yeah, yeah.
Latvia signs it, great, good for you. But
Right.
we don't expect
Yeah,
seeing you up there. But no, I think you're right, and it's particularly we don't want to be surprised when that first space war comes. We
sure,
have to be
sure.
prepared, and it's
Yeah,
so anyway. Okay,
yeah,
well, now we're
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
geeking
yeah.
out, but
And there are probably more Latvians that have been in space than there have been submarines.
I'll check. But
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
so
Pretty
actually,
rad.
we had a namesake visit, and I was out having a strong bourbon with the captain of the submarine, and he was a
Mhm,
little bit frustrated because he's like, if there was a space shuttle named after Tucson, we'd be getting a lot more press locally. And so we
mhm.
started thinking about that. And it's like, well, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. You're operating in an environment that's extremely unhospitable to the human, body, both in space
Yeah,
and at
right.
X number of feet below the surface of the ocean. You make all your own oxygen. So there's a lot of parallels though. So what we did to promote that was we took a USS Tucson ball cap and we gave it to now Senator Mark Kelly when he went up on a mission up to the space station. He took this ball
Sure.
cap with him, wore it, shot video, took pictures. He returned the ball cap to us, and then we gave it back to the Tucson, and they took it down to a depth, an undisclosed depth, but pretty damn deep. And so the
Yeah,
hook there
yeah,
was this ball cap has traveled the furthest between two distances of any ball cap on the planet. So it was a
yeah.
little creative, little PR move.
There's a guy I had on the show. He is a pilot, or at least I think he was a commercial pilot, and he is the deepest free diver of all of the free divers. And he,
Dangerous, crazy.
yeah, right. He dove so deep at his peak that he basically dove as deep as, I think, deeper than a World War II sub, and incomparable to what modern subs can do. Like down like below where fish aren't even there anymore. Is how deep that guy has gone. And it's crazy, like how long he can hold his breath and everything else. It's nuts. It's like 800 feet down. Not
I'll stick
900, but it's somewhere in that zone. 800 plus.
I'll stick to doing a radio show. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
There's some
Hey,
things I just don't,
yeah. Go ahead.
no, there's some things I'm just not willing to. Yeah, you talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will never be a border patrol agent. I could also never be a plumber. God bless them, but
Right.
not for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Plumbing's hard work and it's dirty work. Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
So AFN, awesome. Congratulations. What else is in
Thank
the
you.
pipe then? Like what, I mean, that's not enough, but obviously you're always working on the next thing. So what's out there?
Well, the main goal now is to just start growing the traditional number of affiliates. We are coast to coast now, but and my focus, because I started off self-syndicating, and for a lot of folks who don't know this, your weekend radio shows are what's called brokered time. So that's the skincare products and the lawyers and the financial guys. That's the same thing I do. I'm basically buying an hour of airtime. I write the station a check, and then I get to talk about whatever I want within
Right.
obvious limitations. So when I first started, that's the way I was doing. I'd be buying time in Phoenix and buying time in this market and that market. And finally got to a point where my wife's like, I appreciate what you're doing, but you, you can't be writing these checks all the time. This has got to start breaking even. At least you can't be subsidizing this, your weekend
Right.
hobby. So now that we've been signed to syndication, the Talk Media Network, they handle all that. They handle all the recruitment and getting the new affiliates up and going. And that's been also another learning experience about how I've had. So, for example, I've had to adjust. Before when I owned the whole hour, I could have the segments could be as long as I want. I could take a break, or
Right.
I could do whatever. Well, now it's got to be right on time. Bang, bang, bang. So it works on the other station. So my goal for this year, for 2025, is to augment those stations. Because honestly, Pete, I and I've talked about this. These stories are so important, and
Yeah.
I want to get them to as many ears as possible. And my focus also is on military intensive markets, like Colorado Springs is huge. We're in Norfolk. That's,
Sure.
that's huge. We're Tampa now. So I'd like to focus on those kinds of places. I'd love to get into San Diego and San Antonio sometime this year as well. But
Right.
that was my mindset. But then I thought, well, maybe you got it upside down. The people that need to hear these stories are in, Sheboygan or wide spot in the road, Texas, where they don't have a lot of military presence,
Yeah.
so they don't
Yeah.
know these stories. And of course, everybody's got law enforcement, so that works. But so
Right.
that's the goal for 20. Or I could just say, you know what, Ben, you made it on the Break It Down show. You're done. Move
You're
on.
not done. You're
It's
gonna have
not
to do
gonna.
some
It's not
work.
gonna. It's not gonna any better. And
That's
it's nice
true.
to have you and Scott come through
Yeah.
town every summer and buy me a beer and save the bridge,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Save the. I mean, so ultimately, we don't do the ride anymore now. It was hard to get everybody on the same page on our end. And so, and to that end, I don't really work with Save the Rib, nothing bad, just we want different things. And so we went different directions. But that ride, man, it was incredible. It was incredibly hard and it was incredible to do. And to see how by showing up, people would show up. They're like, well, you came to Atlanta. Why wouldn't we come out and see you? Like,
Mhm.
but we don't know you. They're like, yeah, but you came here for this cause. And that's the incredible thing is so often just by simply doing the thing and being present and not just like mentally present, but like going there, going to Dallas, going to Santa Fe, whatever it is that we're going to stop at, people will come out and they'll want to see what's going on and we're all can talk about like the combined need to try to get us veterans to stop wanting to kill ourselves or whatever the
Mhm.
mission
Mhm.
is. It doesn't have to just be veteran stuff. So yeah, my advice is always to find a cause that it's important to you and figure out how to help make them present and show up because you don't need to start a new cause because there's already a cause for that. Go help the one that exists and get to work.
So, what is your advice for a struggling immigrant like me who's trying to make his way in the radio world? I don't see one of I'm
Yeah.
generally not a sensitive guy. I'm pretty laid back, but one of the things that sort of sticks in my cross when someone says, "Oh, do you have a podcast?" Or I get
Mhm.
a note from a publicist saying, "We'd like to have our client on your podcast." And I grit my teeth saying, "No, we're a radio
Mhm.
show. We're a radio show." That then
We're a
turns into a
radio show.
podcast. But yeah, and
Yeah.
but I don't. I've been thinking about. Someone told me I need to get on YouTube. because it's what, like the second highest search engine in the world or something like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's funny. Twitter and YouTube are search engines now, right? Like people get their information from these places. It's crazy. Yeah, I
but
mean,
I don't have
yeah,
video. I mean, we're a
yeah.
radio
I
show.
don't know that you need
So,
video for YouTube.
okay.
They have a podcast channel where you can just put podcasts up, and they want people to do that, and so they push it forward in the algorithm. Do you need it though? Here's the thing, and I know you know how this goes. My plate is pretty full, and I'll say yes to things, but I've got to find a space on my plate to put that yes, so I can do it. And when other people tell me what I need to do with my show, and I'm like, here's the thing I need you to do. You want me to succeed? You see me working hard? Just kick $5 in a month, $10 a month. You want to make a difference. You want to see me succeed. I'll take that money and I'll put it to work. I don't need more things to do. I need more resources. And it's so funny because sometimes that works. And they're like, you know what? I didn't even think about that. I should ask you, how can I help you? Like, can I buy you lunch? Yes, you can buy me lunch. That helps. I'll count that. That's good help. But don't tell me more things to do. I got
Well,
enough shit to do, man.
and that's something else for, young people or people who are watching this who want to maybe get into my battle space on the radio or yours
Yeah,
podcasting. It's a lot of
it's a lot.
work.
It's a
I
lot.
mean, for, if someone's written a book, in addition to all the other stuff, I mean, we're talking 2, 4 hours prep time just for a 1 hour show. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and
And
then
that's
there's
if you
all
can
the,
read it. That's if you can read a book in 2 hours. Like books take 6 hours to
no,
read
no,
sometimes.
yeah, that's a good point. But
Yeah,
particularly on my end too, there's all the front of the house stuff
oh
that
man,
now I've
so much
I've got
stuff.
a producer that produces the show and does all the editing and whatnot. But I got to go out there and sell the ads. I've got to
Yeah, yeah,
record promos for all the affiliates every week. There's
right.
all this other stuff that's involved with it, and again, it's a privilege. I don't mind doing it, but
Sure.
I do. One of the things that made me feel real good, Pete, during COVID, well, a lot of advertisers pull back, and I'm
Mhm.
still having, the radio station is still expecting their checks. And
Yeah,
I had a number of regular listeners who, one of them took me to lunch and said, you know what, I'm going to write you a check, and I'm going to
yeah.
tell other people to do so too. So we would have failed if it weren't for those,
That's right.
those fans who stepped up and wrote the money to get us through that rough time, and I'm always grateful to them. And I'd like to encourage you again,
Yeah,
if when you see this or when you hear it, if you have a story that you think needs to be told, reach out to Peter, reach out to me, reach out to both of us. Hell, we're not,
yeah,
we're not exclusive, and let's get
yeah.
get this story told. Absolutely.
Yeah, get the story told. And by the way, for you guys wanting to know how to get a hold of Ben, right down there is the link. It's super easy. It's AmericanWarriorRadio.com. It's funny, I have to get a cataract surgery, and so I'm having to like really intently look at things to read right now. And so I'm like, I have to read this slow and with my eyes wide open and try to find a spot around my cataract I can see. But yeah, it is so helpful to have a little bit of money pop in there. And look, I don't want anybody to break the bank, but if you've got a subscription and you're not using, turn that one off and turn it towards me or turn it towards Ben and just give your attention. That stuff it's hugely valuable. And I want to get back into this too. If you think you want to have a show 10-1, that's my ratio, 10 hours to 1 hour of content, and it can only go up from there. If you want to write your own show and do your own creative work or read book, oh my God, it can be a lot. And when someone look, people on X are shitty to people, and so when they're like, oh, here's a guy with a podcast, and I'm like, you have no idea how hard and how successful you can be. Like, look, you wouldn't be doing this if you weren't successful at it. You wouldn't be doing it if you didn't find value in it. And when someone diminishes it out of hand without knowing anything, it's like, no, 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 you're talking to people that have done something incredible. To be around as long as you have, to get syndicated in other markets, to get a syndicator to say, hey, we'd like to help you, that is like, in the history of all of radio, you are way the fuck up on top of that mountain. Yeah, sure, you're not, oh, I don't know, Orson Welles, right? But you're up there above the tree line. And I often forget that, like, how successful I have been on the show and all the people that I get to know now. And it's easy to do that. So when people think about, can you do, of course you can do it, but you've got to do it. And it's really tough and it's steep. It never gets less steep. It's just always hard, but you learn how to deal with that hard. I don't know. What do you think
So,
about those thoughts?
well, mine's a little bit different in that I don't have subscribers. I mean, the product is free.
Right.
That you turn on
Yeah.
the radio or go to American Warrior Radio, and and we're on all the, iTunes and Pandora and Spotify and all those other things too. So my income stream comes from the advertisers and the sponsors.
Right.
And that took me a while, Pete, to kind of get that rhythm down too. And then I
Mhm.
kind of had an aha moment where for our subject matter, it's the usual suspects in every city. It's the gun shop.
Right.
It's the
Right.
divorce attorney. It's and so that I started focusing on them wherever I go. But
Sure.
that's you just constantly have to be hustling and reloading every year to because my inventory on the radio, it's kind of like, I don't know, fruit in a grocery store. If nobody buys it, nobody eats it, it just goes to waste. If I've got that
Right.
30 or 60-second spot that nobody's bought,
Yeah.
you know, that's money that's been burnt.
When
But
you have remnant space, call me. I'll buy an ad from you at a remnant
okay,
cost.
at a remnant cost.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm learning that, and I've talked to my syndicator about it. It's like, at which point how many stations do I have to have before the USAAs or folks
Hmm.
like that start to pay attention? Because that's
Right.
been a challenge too. Is that love your
Yeah.
show, appreciate what you're doing, but we're not even going to bother with you until you're at 50 or 100 or whatever it is. So,
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
goal to build that up this year. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, from a business standpoint, the cool thing about doing radio is I only have to produce a show once. So it's like being able to I manufacture one widget and I can sell that same widget
Yeah.
100 times because it's the
Yeah.
same show, whether it's being, broadcast in Colorado Springs or Long Island. And I'm done with it. So then it's ready to be packaged and sent out
Yeah.
there.
It's a great. I love your success and what it takes to do it. So a guy that I know, maybe you know this guy as well. His name's Eric Erickson, and he, has just done the same thing. He grew channels, grew an audience here, grew an audience there, and just got syndicated again and again until he was a guy that sat in Rush's chair when Rush was too sick to do the show. And
Yeah.
then when Rush passed away, they're like, "Why don't you take Rush's slot?" And so now he's got the Rush Limbaugh show slot at all these markets, and he's
Mm.
just grown and grown and grown. And so sometimes just by just being present and being like, "Yeah, I'll help out." I've covered for radio shows. I don't make a big
Oh
deal
yeah.
about it because it's not my job. My job is to let that person go on vacation. So I might put something on social media, like, "Hey, I'll be covering on sick, whatever." But it's not my audience; it's their audience, right? And so I just do my job. I get in, get out. But then that turns into another opportunity. They're like, "Hey, Ben, can you?" And you're like, "Yes, I can." And it's like, "Oh, here comes a little packet of money from that." Next thing you know, like there are more packets of money coming in from more directions. It's
You
amazing
know,
that you can
it's
still go out and do these things.
I did last week actually. I did a morning drive all week long. And,
Right.
just as a favor to him, I wasn't making any money off it, and he
Sure.
needed to take a vacation. I get that, but that's something else. I mean, you got to be up doing your show prep. You got to, 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
You'd have no
Yeah.
nightlife whatsoever. But the upside of it, I got to promote American Warrior Radio,
Right.
for 12
Yeah.
hours. Um, but then also I got to do things that I don't normally get to do on American Warrior Radio. And we got to have some fun. We got to get a little goofy, and with the sound effects and all, whatever.
Hmm.
We're just having some
Hmm.
fun, and so that was cool. I enjoyed doing that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know that it'll
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
lead
Yeah.
to anything, but yeah. But again,
But I
I've been
mean, it
on the
doesn't
breaking
matter,
down
right?
shows.
It does lead to things, and you and I both know it. Like these things lead to things, and so all of a sudden they're like, "Oh yeah, I heard Ben on that show. Who was that?" Or whatever. And it does. It leads to being more present, being more available. It leads to opportunities, and then you just say yes or no, right? And it might take a while, but then all of a sudden you look back 5 years back, and you're like, "Holy shit, I can't believe it." Like I remember
Right.
the day when they called me and said, "Hey, what do you think?" Because look again, you and I both have called someone or got hold of someone and said, "Hey, I'd like to have you on the show," taking a long shot. And they're like, "It's so funny that you ask. We've been talking about doing a round of podcasts and you're the first, or whatever. Or it's so funny that, and then just by asking or being available, I've had people call me, "Hey, Pete, would you?" And I'm desperate to try to say yes to those things when they make sense. And usually they do. So, yeah, it's anybody wanting to start something, they should. It's going to be impossible. You're probably going to fail. But if you can defy the odds, look where you get to be. It's great. And,
So
and you get to be like that.
my top two requested guests, because we also do regular veteran entrepreneur features. So
Sure.
my top two requested guests are the Evan Hafer from Black Rifle Coffee. Haven't been able to get
Right.
him yet. still trying. And then Tom Hanks. A lot of people want to have Tom Hanks on the show, but he's almost. And now I even had a friend who's kind of sort of in the movies business, and he says, "Look, Hanks has really been into typewriters. So maybe if you actually
Yeah,
find a typewriter and just type an old-fashioned letter and send it to him, maybe that will, get you over the hump. I don't know. We'll
you
see.
never know.
You know.
Yeah,
But
yeah. A
uh,
letter matters.
yeah, well, but now I've also been on the Break It Down show, so Hanks people will probably. In fact, that was probably them calling right now.
You know what? I got a phone call too. Maybe the Hanks people are calling me. Maybe they were kind of group call us. So yeah, listen, I appreciate you coming on. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm so glad that we did this. Let's
No
do it
worries.
again soon. And to just everybody go check out American Warrior Radio and look, you know what to do. Listen to it, support it. Ben is a great dude and he does a lot. And I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your mission and your charter, all these things, man. You're just a good dude. And I appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to spread the gospel, Pete. I really, really do appreciate it. And of course, anything you need, I stand ready to support however I can.
Likewise. Congratulations on AFN. All right. I'm going to say goodbye to you in a second. Everybody else, I'll see you tomorrow. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.